Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Small Business Edge webcast, sponsored by Pitney Bowes Financial Services. Today, I want to welcome back two guests who have recently been on our podcast show, Matt Doherty and Geoff Foster. Today, we're going to be talking about leadership, corporate culture, mental health, and a few other areas in business that have been knocked around during the pandemic. And so with that, I want to welcome to the Small Business Edge webcast, Matt Doherty and Geoff Foster. Morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Sure, it's a pleasure. So what's interesting is, as I mentioned, I both had you individually on the Small Business Edge podcast, and it's very interesting, your backgrounds. You're both actually in North Carolina now, but you both have had tremendous success in your lives. But you've also had to overcome some really deep adversity in your lives. And so I want to touch on that. And I also want to really touch on a little bit of mental health, because we talked about that in our separate podcasts as well. So Matt, let me start with you. First, congratulations on your book, Rebound: From Pain to Passion. Right? You're a bestseller now on what, 2 Amazon lists, soon to be 20?
Yeah, well, a third list, the Doherty household list. That's a new up and coming. Not quite the New York Times, but it's
right. It carries a lot of weight with you.
Yes.
So Matt, in your book, one of the biggest lessons that you shared was learning about emotional intelligence. How can a high level of emotional intelligence help business owners today? One year into the pandemic.
Yeah, well, I think it's more important than ever before, because people are now scattered. Their lives have been disrupted. Their families' lives have been disruptive. And if a leader is not sensitive towards the feelings of their employees, of their team, they will drive a wedge between them and their team. This is a real opportunity for them to gain more respect and trust when adversity hits. Right. I think one of the biggest keys a leader can have is optimism. Hey, everything's going to be all right. We're going to make the best of this. Just think of a mother, let's say a single mother with two children, working for someone like Geoff. Wow. I mean, and let's say their school, they have remote learning. How is she going to, manage her day? It's so disruptive. And if a leader like Geoff, or somebody that, Geoff's VPs isn't sensitive to that person's not going to be loyal to the company, not going to be productive, and probably look for another company to work for at the first chance possible.
Yeah. And that wasn't something, I feel like emotional intelligence didn't really exist 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
It did. I didn't learn of emotional intelligence till 2003, after I was forced to resign at North Carolina. And I went on my leadership journey, and I'm sitting in a class at Wharton, and we're reading The Primal Leadership, The Art of Emotional Intelligence by Dan Goleman. And it's all about emotional intelligence. Yeah. I'm like, if I would have taken this class before I was a head coach, maybe I'd still be the head coach.
Yeah. And that's a great point. Sometimes you have to walk through the fire before you learn the lesson of what fire can do to you. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, all right. And I do want to delve more into that topic, emotional intelligence, mental health, and everything that's going on in the workplace today. Geoff, so in your company, Core Technology Molding Corporations, you have done an amazing job of successfully navigating COVID. You increased your business. You're able to maintain your company's very strong corporate culture and team spirit, which is impressive. And so I'm sure that all of our viewers right now want to know, what is the secret?
Well, Matt really hit on a couple of key points. I did get the opportunity to read the book about EI emotional intelligence. And that really helped me as a leader, as well as my leaders on my leadership team. So I think sometimes in the past, we ask someone, hey, how's it going? Good morning, and keep moving. And I think it's more, especially during the pandemic, hey, how's the family? How are the kids? And I think over the last year, I really learned how old some of my employees' children were, how many children they actually had. And I think, we always were concerned. We went to, graduations and, celebrations, birthdays. But now it's like, okay, I know you got one in kindergarten and you're feeling some real stress because this is your baby's, first year of school, and they're doing homeschooling, and you have a middle schooler who's taking calculus and you are not strong in calculus. So, hey, one of my engineers, can he help? So he would get online and help, her children. Mm-hmm. And I think really digging down a little bit more instead of just, hey, how's it going? How you feeling? Okay, I'll talk to you later. Really understanding the situations they're in, the stress they're feeling, because as Matt pointed out, if they're stressed, they're worried about the kids, they're worried about homeschooling, they're not going to be productive here. And, that can really impact their mental health, and you can end up firing someone because they're not doing a good job. But if you don't really peel back the onion and understand why they're having these issues, you never know, and they'd be unemployed. So, reading that book really helped me as a leader and help my leaders lead where, hey, dig a little deeper, let's find out, what's going on. And we're all facing this pandemic together. But if you don't really ask some of these key questions, how can I help? That keeps the retention here where people don't leave because they're feeling stressed. So that's been helpful.
But it seems like such a rabbit's hole, though, doesn't it? Because that you can't put one foot into that kind of conversation with employees. How are you doing? What's happening at home? How can we help? And then not listen to them. So, and again, this is a topic that I don't think every business is having, right? So right. Let's talk a little bit about that. What should the expectations be for business owners like Geoff, business leaders, Matt, like a lot of the executives that you work with and that you coach, to kind of, it's almost like breaking the barrier, right? Breaking the line between business and personal. What do you tell business leaders and business owners today, Matt, about crossing that line?
Well, I think the line has probably been blurred, getting blurrier over the years. And then, like your analogy, I think it probably just broke this year. I mean, you can't help, as Geoff just described, the work-life balance. We've always talked about the work-life balance, but there's really no balance in work life.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're going to spend at least 8 hours at your job, and, you get up in the morning and you may spend an hour, maybe an hour or two at night. There's no balance. You want it to be quality with your family. So now they're really interwoven. So many people are on Zoom calls, and you hear a baby crying in the background, you hear a dog barking, you hear the doorbell ring. So it is one and the same, work and life are really intertwined, braided, if you will. And you've got to understand that. You don't have to like it, but you better embrace it, because you don't have a choice, and it might be, we've heard the term new normal. So, again, I go to the optimism part. Like, who can navigate through these rough seas the best? Who can take advantage of these and turn the negatives into the positives? I got excited when Geoff mentioned that he had an engineer who was strong in calculus tutoring someone else's child. Like, how cool is that?
Yeah.
You talk about a bond now. And, one thing, all managers, all owners, worry about are silos, right? You worry about silos, people not knowing, the right hand not knowing what the left hand is doing. Well, imagine if you set up a tutorial program at work where, okay, you know, Daryl is the calculus tutor. Anybody needs tutoring, you know, he's going to have a class after work from 5:30 to 6:30, a Zoom call for anyone's kids. Like,
Wow.
that brings the company together. So now just think of the force that they can come out of this COVID pandemic with, of like unity. And I always use the analogy of sports, and my daughter was a rower, and you know, when you have 8 people in the boat and they're not rowing at the same rate or at the same tempo, the boat is not efficient. But if you get 8 people working at the same rate, that boat can fly through the water. So he now will have a more team in sync rowing at the same rate. And they could just blow through this COVID pandemic and maybe set records when they come out of it.
Okay, but is that the cart or the horse? Now, Geoff, you need to have the right mindset in your employees for someone to offer up, hey, I'll help your kid with calculus. So, how, you have to have, there's that great quote, dig your well before you're thirsty, right? You can't start working on company culture when the pandemic hits. That needs to be in place, and that kind of reveals itself, right? So talk to us a little bit about that, about your company culture. You've been around, what, 15, 16 years now?
Yeah, that's right.
Have you always had this, we're all in this together mentality?
Yeah, we always have, Brian, and you bring up a great point. So I mentor other entrepreneurs, and I said, if you're waiting for a pandemic to change your company culture, you're in trouble, and you don't have a solid foundation. So we've always had this family environment. Again, we're very diverse. We have Black, white, Hispanic, from Guatemala, from Africa, from about 15 different countries, gay, lesbian, transgender. We have it all here under one roof. So, it's a family environment. And do you love everyone in your family? Do you get along with everyone? Not necessarily. However, we work together, and we know that they bring value from some of their humble beginnings, the way they were raised. They have different thoughts, but we come up with great solutions. And I think if you have that foundation where you don't have everyone that looks the same, talks the same, thinks the same, dresses the same, you're going to have a better workplace to come up with solutions. And I think people want to help people. I think good people want to help other people succeed. So whether it's making a better plastic part for BMW, or whether it's helping your child learn calculus because you're not capable of doing that, but there's not a fee for it. So, as Matt said about rowing the boat, if we can change an employee's behavior 180 degrees in 2 weeks, there was no pay increase. They didn't get a promotion, but they feel good on the inside because their kids learning, and they were struggling with that because they couldn't help them. And that's when the boat really starts to take off, where we're coming up out of the water because behavior was changed. And it was something it seemed so simple, but to them, it was monumental. Their kid's going to fail this class. I can't help them. I don't want them to know that I'm a high school dropout. Man, there's so many emotional things going on. They weren't thinking about work, making parts for BMW and shipping to South Africa. That's the last thing on their mind. They're just physically here. So if you don't have that culture, and unfortunately, if you wait for a pandemic to start building it, you're in trouble. And I think you're seeing those companies fall by the wayside, where they're going out of business because they didn't have the culture, and really they didn't, quite honestly, care about their employees. They didn't care about their health, their mental health, their well-being. And during a pandemic, that comes out. They really didn't care. You were just there, and you were working, and they didn't care how you felt. And I think if you have that culture at your company, you're going to fail.
It's a great point. It's a friend of mine has an expression, harvesting intangible assets like company culture. He calls them Rembrandts in the attic. That when a pandemic strikes and you think about all of the time that you spent developing a team bond within your company, and again that gets revealed in a pandemic, and all of a sudden you realize you painted a Rembrandt. So for the past 16 years you've been painting this masterpiece of a company, and that is why, and you know this, is why you succeeded last year when a lot of companies didn't, and your business grew. And now, companies like Merck are coming to you to help them with production during the pandemic. Am I right?
That's right.
So let's talk to then our viewers and listeners right now who are kind of in that in-between stage of their company culture. It's a good place to work at. It's not a great place to work at. They help each other, but they don't go out of their way to help each other, right? It's not they're actively disengaged in the workforce, but they're somewhere in between disengaged and engaged. What steps can business leaders take to foster this sense of team unity? Okay, and Matt, maybe you can weigh in on this, like with a team that you were coaching or you played on, where you were having a lousy season. I remember you talk about the one kid on Notre Dame who went 0 for 5 in the first half of a game, and you sat him down and you said, look, you're the best shooter on this court, and you kind of opened his eyes to what his potential was. So let's talk a little bit about translating that into companies right now that have struggled through the pandemic, but they're still around. What would you tell them in 2021? What's the best way to develop that team bond?
Well, I'm more curious with Geoff's answer. I think it's I'm a fundamental guy. I'm a coach, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got to talk to them.
Yeah.
You got to talk to them in a non-threatening, safe environment. You mentioned it in our last podcast. Vulnerability is the new invincibility.
Yeah.
So I think that as a leader, it's important to get comfortable with your people in a safe environment where they feel they can talk and share their vulnerabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And the best way for them to do that is for you to share yours. Like, hey guys, I'm concerned. Like this pandemic's real. I have concerns about, our customers, our suppliers, but my biggest concern is you all, because you're my most important resource. So I want to know what's going through your minds and hearts, and let's just put it out on the table. And how can we may not have an answer, but I think by just sharing it in an environment, a caring environment, a respectful environment, a trusting environment, at least getting that on a table. Anger turned inward leads to depression. It can become a distraction. You get frustrations. By airing it out, at least it's a shared now concern, and people now feel they're in it together. The worst thing in the world is feeling like you're alone. Yeah. And everyone feels like they're alone, even though they know the person next to them is probably struggling too. But to actually hear that person say they're struggling, like Geoff said, most good people are inclined to put their arm around somebody and say, hey, it's going to be okay. We're going to get through this.
Yeah. Right.
And sometimes that's all somebody needs.
Yeah. I love that. Addressing the elephant in the room. Everybody knows it's there. It's a matter of identifying it. Geoff, what do you think?
Yeah. So something great that Matt said, I think is really important here is transparency. Yeah. So, having open discussions, and not just about career goals, but personal goals. So I think that's really helped us be successful where we're not just worried about, hey, where do you want to do 2-3 years from now? Hey, hey, I want to get a house. I want to get a car. I want to start saving for our kids' college tuition. Hey, can you help me put me in touch with a financial advisor? So I think it's kind of not just worried about work, but what can we talk about that can help you in your personal life as well? And I think when they see the sincere concern that you want to help me, not just make widgets, there's more to life than just plastic injection molding and widgets. So I think the transparency and then really understanding, like Matt said, you got to talk to them. At the end of the day, I want to know what you want to do 3 to 5 years from now, and let's put a development plan together, right? So when I put this development plan together, it's showing here's where Brian's at today. Brian wants to be this in 2 years. In 3 years, he wants to do this. Okay, how can we get him there? And I think when you put that plan together in writing, a development plan, that's when things really move quicker. When they see a plan in place that they couldn't come up with the plan on their own, but all you had to do was ask them what they really wanted to do. Like Matt said, you got to talk to them. And you'd be surprised. We have women that can do some really technical things that don't mind getting grease on their hands. And, when they came in for an interview, they had, hands painted up. So you never even thought that. They wanted to be a technician. They want to clean molds. But, I would have never known that. I would have never even bet that they wanted to do that. But when you understand what they really want, what makes them feel good, hey, let's put a plan together. I know it sounds crazy, but you're going to be a tool maker. You're going to be working in the shop with other guys, and your hands are going to be covered with grease every day, and they're fine with that. That makes them feel good. But if you don't ask, you don't know, you have them doing something that's administrative, and it drives them crazy. And that's what you don't want to do, because you lose good people, you lose good players, because you didn't really understand what they wanted to do, what their goals were. So I think you really got to sit down and understand, but more importantly, you got to put a plan together. This is how we're going to get you there, whether it's taking classes, whether it's getting mentored, training, visiting supplier plants. We're going to get you there. We just got to know what you want to do. We'll put a plan together.
So
Brian, can I interrupt? And can I ask Geoff a question or two?
Sure.
Okay. I'm hijacking. I'm hijacking. It's just my way. I'm a ENTJ. I'm a DI. I cannot not lead. Okay.
Yeah.
So Geoff, you're an engineer by trade, left brain thinker, and now you're moving over to the right side of your brain. You started out making the products, in that success pyramid. You go from the technical skill. Now you got to flip it to the people skill. You're not making those widgets anymore. You're telling other people. You're managing people. Like, how difficult was it for you to make that transition from the maker to the leader? And now being just worried maybe about yourself and your job, to now having to be worried about other people and how they think and feel. Your emotional intelligence. How did I think it's pretty amazing that an engineer talks like you talk, with that feeling for other people. That's not the stereotypical engineer in my mind.
Well, no, Matt, that was my next question, by the way. Damn it. All right, hold on.
Typical Chaminade guy.
Go ahead. Yeah, Holy Trinity stepping on my toes.
Yeah, no, that's funny. But Matt, like yourself, yeah, I love STEM and engineering, but I've always been the coach, the ENTJ, and my deeply embedded life interests are more towards coaching than even making the product. So having that balance is key. So I try to coach my other engineers to have some balance. Don't be so heavy STEM where you don't care about people and you can only work in a corner like Dilbert. And when people see you coming, they run the other way because they don't want to talk to you. And,
yeah.
And that's why I try to coach these guys, because you can be so heavy STEM engineering that you have to work alone. Nobody wants to play in the sandbox with you. They don't like you. And that's the balance that I've been able to obtain, work on, that is not just technical, but you got to have good people skills and you got to sincerely care about people and their well-being. And that makes it easy to teach someone when they know that you care about them instead of just the numbers.
But where do you learn that? Do you develop that skill? Like, tell me how you got where you became aware of that.
Right. So I think even in MBA school, going through the Harvard Business Reviews and reading story after story of successful companies and companies that failed, they had something in common: how they manage people, how they work with people, how they led people. And the companies that did real well, they managed people well. The companies that failed, they did not. And I think that kind of pounded it into my head that you got to be a strong leader. You can't just be strong technically. If you're not a strong leader, you're going to make a bunch of product, but no one's going to be working for you.
It's amazing how sports and business overlap, isn't it?
You do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wish I would have taken that class with Geoff before I became a head coach.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, as I said, there's a couple of other things that you both have in common, and I want to talk about this. We talk about vulnerability, kind of wearing your heart on your sleeve in business and sharing your weaknesses, your concerns with your employees or your teams, and being the leader who shares empathy with their teams. Matt, you've documented the two hardest moments in your life, right? The NBA draft, where you went 6th round to Cleveland instead of 3rd round to Boston. And then the day that you found out you were going to be forced to resign from a dream job 2 years after you were named Coach of the Year. And Geoff, you're a young engineering MBA student at Wake Forest working for a company, and you develop a $31 million idea, and you get a $99 plaque for it and a thank you. And as I like to say, you didn't even get the steak dinner.
I did not.
No steak dinner. So here you are really with these incredible weights that have just landed on you, right? Where you feel like you got, you were developing something, right? You share your genius with the world, right? And with your company and with your team. And it's almost like you got hit in the head with a 2x4, and so how do you overcome that? And as a leader, when you're in business and you make a mistake like that, how do you maintain the trust of your employees or your team? Let's start with that question. So you're a business leader today. A lot of mistakes have been made in the pandemic, right? Some bigger than others. What do you tell business leaders who've made these mistakes, who are trying to maintain trust and leadership with their employees? Geoff.
Yeah, I think one thing that I share often is to fail fast. So if you see something going down the wrong path and you have the data to support it, don't keep going down that path. Fail fast and always have contingency plans. So, our customers require us to have contingency plans in case of a hurricane, a fire, electrical outage, but we never talked about pandemic. So now in our contingency plan, we have a backup plan. Okay, we have to bring in a whole new staff if we have an outbreak here in the plant. So I think you have to learn from your mistakes, and whether it's in business or even in sports, Matt, if you guys get beat by 28 points and there's some things that you guys missed as far as studying your team, your opponent, you have to learn from that. So when you play them again or you play the next guys, you don't make that same mistake. So, you're going to make mistakes. We're all going to make mistakes, but you got to fail fast and keep moving. Don't keep going down the same path. If you're getting killed in a one-on-one, man-to-man, you better go to a zone. You better figure out something differently. You got to adjust. And I think during the pandemic, if you're not able to adjust or able to pivot, you're going to fail.
So it's a Matt, acknowledging that failure, saying, look, as your coach, I screwed up.
Yes. yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
That's real, authentic leadership. And I played for maybe the best coach in all of team sports in Dean Smith. And after a loss, first of all, after a game, he never talked to us about whether we played well or not. He would just say, good game. We'd say a prayer. And then the next day, he wanted to watch the film first. He didn't want to make comments based off of emotion or what he thought he saw. But what he would say to the media after a win, he'd give the players credit. After a loss, he would take the blame. And I think it is important for leaders to take blame, to say, hey, I'm sorry, I didn't put us in position to be successful, or I didn't expect that to happen. The pandemic, listen, no one saw that coming. So, but the leader has to have optimism, has to have contingency plans, has to have direction, has to be able to ready to pivot when the data and their gut supports it. They have to lean on their senior staff, but at the end of the day, they have to make the decision.
Right.
That's why they're the leader. But I think it is important to explain the why to your team and take accountability when it fails. Say, I made a bad call. I made it based on this information. Boom, boom, boom. We've addressed that. We are now moving in this direction. Any questions? And then let's go. Now you can't make too many mistakes. Like, this cannot be a recurring, weekly conversation, right? That's then it's when you go out of business. But if you're competent, and I think it's important to have a senior staff that, and I've told my senior staff before, hey, I want debate in this conference room. It's not your right to challenge me. It's your obligation to challenge me in a respectful manner. I may not take your suggestion because I may not be able to visualize it, feel it. I don't feel it in my gut. But when we walk out that door, we need to be aligned. Right. Because the worst thing that can happen is Geoff walks into a meeting with his senior staff and somebody in the back is going, man, this isn't going to work. And one of the senior staff members said, yeah, I didn't like the idea either. That's where they got to be aligned. And that's where character comes in to play.
Right. I think, to Geoff's point, he has, the Rainbow Coalition, right? At his workplace, right? He has diversity in gender and ethnicity and color. And just as important, to your point, Matt, is diversity of thought. If everybody's saying yes to you and they're not that truth teller, which you talk about, they see something that may indicate that you're on the wrong path and they don't say anything to you, then how good is that? What they didn't feel comfortable enough to say anything or speak their mind, right?
That's your fault as a leader. That's your fault as a leader. You didn't mind the truth.
100%, right? Geoff, in your business, if somebody sees something early on in a molding process, but they don't speak up about it out of fear, because you've already invested in the mold itself and you're working on it, that's going to cost you a lot more time and money, right? But you've given them the freedom to bring that to your attention without any kind of, I'm going to shoot the messenger now, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So I think it's important that, you empower your team, you empower your leaders to shut down a process or at least bring it to someone's attention. I don't like yes men. So usually yes men get worked out of our company pretty quickly, that just say yes and they know something's wrong. And that's a problem that could put us out of business. So if I have an employee who doesn't want to rock the boat. And the worst thing I hear is, hey, I knew that was a problem a week ago, but I didn't want to say anything. Well, we just made $200,000 of scrap. Why wouldn't you say something? Well, I just didn't, I didn't think I should say anything. Those are the ones that we don't want. Those guys are dangerous to your organization. But you, again, as a leader, you have to make them feel very comfortable that, hey, when you see an issue or you feel something brewing, let's be a preventive approach, not reactive. And I think, that's got to be, you almost reward people. You have to reward people for coming forward and saying, you know what, something is running there is not right. Or if someone says something inappropriate on the floor to an employee, hey, I got to bring something to your attention. I overheard a conversation that just didn't sound just right. And I think we need to investigate it. That's how you get out of situations where you're on the news trying to explain about sexual harassment, issues that happen in the workplace because someone knew something and didn't say anything. So you got to really reward people who bring things up that are not easy to talk about, but you can't shoot the messenger. Because at the end of the day, that messenger could save your business or save your team.
Yeah, it does. Is there a fine line between trying to correct a situation versus firing somebody? I mean, some days you need the wisdom of Solomon, where a situation comes across your desk, and you have to say to yourself, "Am I going to fire this person, or am I going to use this as a learning moment?"
Yeah, and there is a fine line, and that's why sometimes I try to use a 24-hour rule, where I kind of digest it, think about it, and then come back and make a decision a day later. Unless it's putting someone's life or well-being in danger. I try to wait 24 hours on some of those decisions because some of those people that you were gonna fire turned out to be my best employees. It was a learning experience. They realized what they did, how it was wrong. They'll never do it again, and they turned out to be my best employee, and we could have fired them. So, I think sometimes you just have to think about it a little bit before you make a rash decision.
That's a great. It's the Dean Smith wait to watch the tape, Matt. Right?
Yes. Good point. Yes, 100%.
Well, that is probably one of the best takeaways from today's conversation. Is that that pause between do I have enough information, because I'm going to change somebody's life here if I make this decision right now. So let me sit on it and let me think about it. I think is probably the best advice right now. We are actually in the home stretch, gentlemen. What a fantastic conversation. I hope that everybody who is watching this and who watches it later on really appreciates and implements the advice and the insights that you shared with us today, because I think it's fantastic. This is almost like an MBA class on how to be a business leader today. We're kind of I'd like to think, in the tail end of this pandemic, where there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not the headlight of an oncoming train. That businesses are starting to fully reopen, and that we will get back to whatever that new abnormal ways of doing business, right, become. So there's going to be a pivot again at some point. And the way we do business today is probably not going to be the way we do business later this year and into next year. So what advice would you give to business leaders, business owners who are facing another turn in the road when it comes to their employees, their customers, and kind of everybody in their ecosystem? What do you tell them about what we've learned from the pandemic, or how they can embrace this pivot? I'll let Geoff, why don't you take that?
Let Geoff go.
Sure. And I talked a little bit about just contingency plan is one thing, but I think you have to be creative. You got to think outside the box. How can we have meetings? How can we bring customers in to get new business? So now we have several videos that we've created, 8 to 10 minutes long, where we've been awarded new business with Volvo, with Mac, with Unilever. They haven't even been here. That's kind of unheard of. Usually they want to get to touch, feel, scratch, sniff before they award you business. But you got to think differently. If you keep doing the same thing, you're not going to get results that are favorable going into or coming out of a pandemic or the next pandemic. You got to think differently. You got to be creative. And I think that's what's helped us grow during a pandemic. I mean, we're going to double, possibly triple this year. I think we had things in place, not just contingency with employees, but we treat customers differently as far as how can we reach them without ever touching their facility or without ever going to Ireland, without going to Munich this year. How can we grow this business? And that's the way you got to think. You got to think differently. You can't just be, well, I'm going to hop on a plane and I'm going to fly over there 8 hours and we're going to meet and we're going to go to dinner. That's not going to happen. So you better have a plan. How can we grow? How can we get stronger without ever touching, without even seeing them face to face?
It's building your foundation. It's having a strong foundation that you can leverage regardless of the situation. I love that. Matt, I'm going to give you the final word.
I just think that it's I look at it like a season, a basketball season. You know, after every season, you need to study and evaluate, just like somebody does, like Geoff does in business. You know, year end, let me look at the numbers. Let's meet with your senior staff. What was good? What was bad? What do we need to continue to do or enhance going forward? What do we need to eliminate? And I think that's the same thing that you do in basketball. Mm-hmm. Hey, listen, you know, we got in foul trouble, or our best player our center ended up getting hurt. So we played small ball. We had to press more. We had to play more in the perimeter and drive more. We played quicker. And it worked. Yeah. Maybe we should play that style more often. Yeah. And recruit to it. Or, you know, our whatever, our zone out of bounds underneath defense really stunk. So we need to scrap that and come up with new ideas. Let's do some research on it and assign that to one of your assistants. I want you to study, you know, the best 5 programs in the country and Europe and see what they do out of bounds underneath on their defense, because that cost us 5 games this year. And just think, if we had 5 more wins, we would have been a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament instead of a 7 seed. Yeah. So it's just evaluating in a calm, level-headed demeanor, and looking at the data, asking for input, and then picking 2 or 3 things that you can build on or revamp.
Yeah. You know, it's as my father always said, you're going to make mistakes in your life. Just don't make the same mistake twice or 3 times or 4 times.
Well, you won't, in Geoff's business or mine, you don't have the chance to make that same mistake twice. Yeah. You know, you'd be out of it. You'd be fired, or the plant will close down.
Right. Or the client will fire you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great advice. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today and your wisdom and your insights. I know that I'm going to get questions from my viewers. How do I get in touch with Matt or Geoff, or how do I follow them on social media? So anybody who's watching this now who would like to either connect with you or follow you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Sure. Well, Brian, you can share my email address as well as Core Tech Molding on Twitter.
Core Tech Molding on Twitter. Matt, what's maybe on social media?
Twitter is @Doherty Matt. That's DOHERTY MATT @DohertyMatt. My website is coachmattdoherty.com. And I have email access there and a phone number.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. I want to thank Pitney Bowes Financial Services for all that they do in sponsoring our content and the work that they do with business owners. And lastly, I want to thank our viewers. and our listeners to our podcast and the people who read our blogs, and for all your topic suggestions, your feedback, your comments and questions. Definitely keep them coming. We love them. We get some great ideas from you. And if you want to share anything with me from this webcast, you can reach me at Brian, Brian, at SmallBusinessEdge.com. With that, I want to thank everybody, and please enjoy your day. And I hope that you take the content you heard today and apply it to your business so you become better business leaders. Have a great day, everybody.